Thank you. Let me now introduce the second keynote speaker for this evening, Dr. Karen Leonard, an historian and anthropologist who is Professor Emerita at the University of California, Irvine, with a 1969 PhD from the University of Wisconsin on the history of India. She has published on the social history and anthropology of Hyderabad state and on Punjabi Mexican Americans, South Asian Americans, and Muslim Americans. Her books include Making Ethnic Choices, California's Punjabi Mexican Americans, South Asian Americans, Muslims in the United States, the State of Research, The Locating of Home, India's Hyderabadis Abroad, a multi-site ethnography of the diaspora from Hyderabad to Pakistan, the UK, Australia, Canada, the US, and the Gulf states of Middle East. The title of her keynote speech is Changes Over Time. Punjabis, Punjabi Mexicans, and Sikhs in North America. Please welcome Dr. Karen Leonard.
In the 1980s, I studied a community in Southern California that had been fathered by Punjabi men in the early 20th century. Most of the mothers were Mexican or Mexican American. The community was then called Mexican Hindu. Now we call them Punjabi Mexicans. As I spoke and published about this bi-ethnic community, the research elicited ambivalent reactions from the new post-1965 immigrants from South Asia, who generally came as families where both parents were South Asian. The new immigrants had questions. How and why did the Punjabi Mexican community develop in Southern California and elsewhere in the American Southwest? Should this community be acknowledged or not? Should it be denied or celebrated? These, of course, are important questions, especially for the new Punjabi Sikh immigrants, because most of the early Punjabi immigrants were Sikhs, about 80–85%. In my experience, the new Punjabi Sikhs most often have tried to downplay this early bicultural community, usually explaining it by making inaccurate claims about non-citizens gaining access to land by marrying Mexican-American women. This, of course, is not true. The Cable Act from 1922 to 1931 took away American citizenship from women marrying aliens ineligible to citizenship. But the history of the Punjabi Mexican community and its relationship to the new South Asian immigrants has proved to be a very important and controversial topic. And the state of this community in the early 21st century is also of interest. What does the Punjabi Mexican story have to say about religious and cultural identities, especially the identities of Sikh immigrants to the US? The relatively recent immigrants by new Sikh immigrants, recent efforts by new Sikh immigrants to recast this early Punjabi diaspora as a Sikh diaspora emphasizes religion rather than language, occupation, or place of origin. Comparing the early 20th century and the later post-1965 Punjabi and Sikh diasporas to the US, I argue that the earlier Punjabi diaspora reflects a lingering cosmopolitan Mughlai or Indo-Muslim culture in South Asia, while the more recent Punjabi Sikh diaspora reflects modern independent India and shows slippages or possible slippages into communities narrowly based on religion. Meanwhile, the Punjabi Mexicans, rather than reclaiming ancestral religious identities, have moved to claim membership in the nation as mainstream Americans, taking pride in their ancestral, cultural, or ethnic heritage. So I'll make 3 points in this talk. I'm going to start by talking about the early Punjabis in the Punjabi Mexican community. Then I'll move to talk about the recent Sikh diaspora. And finally, what's happening now among the Sikhs and the Punjabi Mexican community. So these two diasporas were very different. They took place in distinctly different historical periods. The Punjabi pioneers, early 1900s on, yes, 85% Sikhs, but identities were not defined then, I argue, by religion, but by region, languages, and occupation. They came from the Punjab region of British India. They spoke Punjabi and Urdu. If they were educated in the Urdu script, Perso-Arabic script, and they really reflected a lingering Mughlai or Indo-Muslim culture, I would argue. They were farmers, and they were largely not educated, largely illiterate. The Sikhs were mostly Jats. 10 or 12% were Muslims. There were a few, 1 to 3% Hindus among them. They were all called Hindus by others at that time, meaning from Hindustan, from India, not a religious meaning at that time. The pioneer Punjabis' religious differences were bridged by farming partnerships and by marriage and godparent relationships. They were leasing partners across religious lines. About 385 marriages that I picked up mostly were to Hispanic women, 80% Hispanic women, and sets of Mexican or Mexican-American sisters married sets of farming partners. So men could be related by marriage, Sikhs to Muslims, Sikhs to Hindus, etc., even perhaps to Mexican men in a few cases through sets of sisters. And they also served as godparents in the Catholic Church to each other's children, compadrazgo system, without regard to religious differences, ignoring or transgressing legal traditions and customs grounded in Sikhism, Hinduism, Islam, and Catholicism. For example, godparents in the Catholic Church should have been Catholic. Sometimes the men were renamed in these documents, Miguel instead of Magyar, for example. Most of the early Sikhs took off their turbans and shaved due to the prejudices against them. The Muslims were buried in so-called Hindu plots in California's rural towns, and it was Urdu that gave their names and village origins on the gravestones. But these men were largely uneducated. They didn't have copies of the Guru Granth or of the Quran, and they were fine with their children being raised by the mothers, mostly in the Catholic religion. The men said there were many ways to the oversoul, to God. The men were also united politically in two very important fights against the British, of course, in India. And Sikh, Muslim, and Hindu men worked together in the Ghadar Party here in California and against the discriminatory laws in the US, ultimately fighting for US citizenship together. As we all know, there were laws, discriminatory laws against immigration. I don't really need to go through 1917 Barred Zone Act, 1924 National Origins Quota Act, 1923 Supreme Court decision barring Indians from citizenship on racial grounds. And the consequence of that last was subjecting the Punjabis to the alien land laws of California and elsewhere, which barred aliens ineligible to citizenship from leasing or owning agricultural land. These men were almost all farmers. There were marriage restrictions, anti-miscegenation laws, even in California, requiring the same race on marriage license applications: white, white, black, black, brown, brown. They mostly put brown, brown, and married Hispanic women. The Stockton Sikh Temple, founded in 1912, everyone went to it, Muslims and Hindus and Mexican, American and Mexican women and Mexican Hindu children, all. A social center, really, rather than primarily religious, I would argue, in those very early days. We finally got the 1946 Luce Seller Bill giving citizenship that brought limited immigration, then the 1947 partition of British India with Indian independence and also Pakistani. This was a shock to the Punjabis here, and a term was invented over in Arizona, Spanish Pakistanis, to contrast with the Mexican Hindus, which was still used. Hindu is still used in California's agricultural valleys, although they now say old Hindus and new Hindus. Anyway, my second point brings us to the Sikh diaspora. Certainly, there is a very strong recent post-65 Sikh diaspora, large numbers of educated urban families coming to the U.S. It's a totally different time in both India and the U.S., different legal and political situations in both countries. And now religious identities are far more important. And I'll illustrate with 3 anecdotes from my research. First, a second and third generation Punjabi Mexican testify. And finally, I give an episode, a young Sikh student in Amritsar in 1991, to show the sharp differences in identity. I remember sitting in the bar of a steakhouse in El Centro in the Imperial Valley with the owner, Omar Dean. His father was a Punjabi Muslim, his mother was from Mexico. Omar spoke Spanish and English, and he was Catholic. He had named the steakhouse Chavelas, a nickname for Isabella, his Mexican-American wife. He told me proudly, "My dad was a Hindu. He came from the Punjab. His name was Muhammadin, and I'm a Hindu too." Others of the second generation told me they were Catholic and Sikh or Catholic and Muslim, contending, as their fathers had done, that all religions ultimately addressed a single divine force or figure. The third generation was at an even greater distance from the Punjab. When I spoke at the Holtville Rotary Club about Punjabi history and the immigrants to the Imperial Valley, I had been invited by a Rotary Club member, son of a Punjabi Sikh father and Mexican-American mother. Another speaker at the meeting was the granddaughter of a Punjabi Mexican couple. She was being honored as high school valedictorian. I'll call her Jasbir Singh. After my talk, she excitedly accosted me. "I know I'm a Hindu, and I'm so proud of that, but I didn't know about those 3 religions. Tell me, was my grandfather a Sikh, a Muslim, or a Hindu?" Jasbir Singh. Her name clearly identified her as the descendant of a Sikh in India's religious landscape, but she did not know its meaning. The Hindu identity and the very existence of the Mexican Hindus were surprising and shocking not only to recent Western-educated Sikh immigrants from the Punjab, but to Punjabi Sikhs in India. And I was invited by Harish Puri to come in 1991 to give a talk in Amritsar at Guru Nanak Dev University about the Mexican Hindus. As I spoke, a young Sikh with beard and turban rebuked me fiercely. "Madam, they could not have let themselves be called Hindus. They could not have called their Gurdwara in Stockton a temple. Temples are for Hindus." But I had a 1947 photograph with me showing the Stockton building with its sign reading Sikh Temple. And we were sitting in a classroom near Amritsar's Golden Temple, but no one thought of that at the time. Now let me move on to my third point and talk about Sikhs today. Certainly the recent diaspora, the post-65 diaspora, a real Sikh diaspora, large numbers, highly educated professional people, largely urban or with a lot of urban experience. And the emphasis is certainly on religion. But since Oak Creek and 9/11, I think we see a broader reaching out to members of other religious groups and to individuals. Social justice, with the activists at the table here tonight, the members of United Sikhs, progressive goals, working with and for other religions, other religious communities. So I would call this, again, cosmopolitan, like the early pioneers, reaching beyond, working with others. We have had, and within the Sikh Studies community, it seems to me the conflict level has gone down over the last 20, 30 years. I remember in 1986 at the Michigan conference, we had picketers, protesters outside. We've often been troubled in the past by conflict within the Sikh community. And of course, our host, Professor Peshara Singh, has been a victim and a survivor and a triumphant member of the Sikh scholarly community, making major contributions to scholarship on Sikhism. So I would like to think, I hope, that the conflict level within the community has subsided and that the second and third generations are reaching out and reaching beyond and broadening their identities in the American cultural landscape. That would be my argument. Now I'll talk about the Punjabi Mexicans today. Do we have a Punjabi Mexican community still? And there is no longer such a community. In all the centers of that early community, the Imperial Valley, the Central Valley, the Sacramento Valley, and over in Arizona, the second and subsequent generation descendants have married out. There is no longer a network linking them to each other, but they have very fond memories. Their spouses include Anglo and Hispanic Americans, other Pakistanis, other Indians, including Parsis, immigrants from Switzerland and all around the world. They see themselves as mainstream Americans. The post-65 new immigrants from South Asia and some confrontations with them have spurred these Punjabi Mexican young people to recognize their own by ethnicity and be proud of it, but use it to claim a mainstream American identity. Descendants of the immigrants take great pride in the Punjabi heritage and in the mixed heritage as well. They're still cooking chicken murgi. And anyway, descendants continue to write to me seeking information about their ancestors. And having donated my research materials to the Latin American, Mexican American, and Iberian collections at the Green Library at Stanford University, it turns out the South Asian archivists were not so interested. I usually have to refer inquiries to that collection now. Many of the scholars and artists doing further research come from backgrounds beyond the Punjabi or Punjabi Mexican community, strengthening the argument for the mainstreaming of the community and its story. First was Jaishree Majumdar Hart, who directed and produced a documentary film in the 1990s about the Punjabi Mexicans, distributed through the Center for Asian American Media. Her documentary, Roots in the Sand, photographed in the Imperial Valley, captures vivid images and words that are no longer available. And there are many more interested young people. And what is so striking about the many diverse efforts to document and evoke the experience of the Punjabi Mexicans is the broad interest in that experience. Both Chicano, Latino, and Asian American scholarly communities find the early diaspora, the Punjabi diaspora, of great interest. And I get inquiries from the Mexican embassy in Delhi, from scholars in Pakistan and in Denmark, and many, many young people of very diverse backgrounds, but usually young people in this country of South Asia, very diverse South Asian backgrounds. My personal experience has been that the children and grandchildren of the post-65 Sikh diaspora, and indeed of the entire South Asian diaspora, are as interested in the early Punjabi diaspora as are the Punjabi Mexican descendants. Becoming American is a generational process. The descendants of the post-65 immigrants are themselves marrying beyond caste and religious boundaries. The fact that the wives of the early Punjabi pioneers were chiefly Mexican or Mexican American is not the chief reason for the descendants' identities and marriages moving away from the specific religious and cultural affiliations of the immigrant Punjabi men. Becoming mainstream citizens, becoming cosmopolitan, helps ensure the survival of the Punjabi Mexican experience, if not of the community itself. So I have a longer piece coming out in a book edited by Doris and Opinderjeet. It's probably out, but we haven't seen it yet. So, yeah, I know. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Leonard, for your thoughtful remarks in your keynote speech. We appreciate it very much. Now I would like to recognize our staff members who have been working hard behind the scenes for months. Irene Dotson, could you please stand up? Geneva Amador. Don Vivech. Diana Marukin. And Tanya Vine. And I would like to acknowledge all volunteers, undergraduate and graduate students. Please stand up. Thank you very much. Now I will request Tejpal Singh to take over the stage.
Thank you. So now we're going to get on to the honoring those who have made significant contributions to the field of Sikh studies. And our first honoree of the night is Dr. Parminder Kaur Pachu. So real quick, let me introduce her and give her a bio and highlight her before. Dr. Pachu, you can have a seat for a quick second. Let me just, sorry about. So Dr. Parminder Kaur Pachu is a professor in the Department of Sociology at Clark University. She is the author of Movers and Makers, Uncertainty, Resilience, and Migrant Creativity in the Worlds of Flux, Trice Migrants, Dangerous Designs, and the co-editor of Enterprising Women, and also Immigration and Entrepreneurship. She has held a Henry Luce Professor of Cultural Identities and Global Processes and has been a Director of Women's Studies at Clark University. She has lived in multiple sites in East Africa, the United Kingdom, and on both the East and West Coast of the United States. Her first book, Twice Migrants, has its own individual category in the Encyclopedia of Race and Ethnicity. When she did her PhD, it was capturing the migration trajectory of East African Asians, the Sikhs in particular. She was describing a pattern of multiple movements, but it is now an all-encompassing, more powerful concept as it applies to so many groups in the USA and throughout the world. She wrote this entry in the encyclopedia, and she can see Twice Migrants in many articles, and last year in the UK there was a revival, a focus on partition of 1947. It has a new life for 4 decades on with a new generation of young people. In her latest work, Movers and Makers, she forcefully argues that immigrants are the most innovative people in the world. They hold the highest number of patents per capita and add 10% to GDP through innovations that benefit the world at large. The intrinsic Sikh sensibilities of collaboration, of sharing, and of radical generosity, as reflected in egalitarian Sikh institutions, have much in common with the contemporary equalizing movements of open source and licensing technologies, free souls sharism, crowdsourcing, participative pedagogy, and the Creative Commons. Historic Sikh traditions are thus absolutely in sync with the currents of our time and catalyze diasporic creativity. I would now like to request Dr. Karen Leonard to join Dr. Pashwara Singh in honoring Dr. Pachu.
And I'll be kind of on the same. This is beautiful. Thank you so much. It warms the the deepest couples. And there's so much invisible work that goes into it.
Our second honoree is Dr. Joris Jacobish. Dr. Joris Jacobish's interest in Sikhism. Doris. I'm sorry, it's been a long day. I'm starting to I think my words are kind of slurring just from the sleep deprivation. Apologies. Starting over, Dr. Doris Jacobish's interest in Sikhism stems back to the 1990s. While working on Professor Diana Eck's Pluralism Project at Harvard University, most especially through a visit to a 3HO Gurdwara. Fascinated by religious experiences on the margins of traditions and wanting to know more, Doris moved to Vancouver to work with Professor Harjot Oberoi at UBC to research Sikhs in Canada. However, the necessary grounding work of Sikh history led to what seemed an anomaly, namely differences in the ritual and regulatory frameworks surrounding Kaurs and Singhs. Thus, armed with more questions than answers, Doris headed to Punjabi University in Patiala with her partner and 2 young children. Her doctorate, Relocating Gender in Sikh History, published in 2003 by Oxford, reflects those early questions. Hired at the University of Waterloo in 2004, she serves as professor in religious studies. Women in Sikh History with Oxford University Press was Dr. Jacobish's first edited work in 2010. This first of its kind volume gathered scholars from across a wide spectrum of disciplines. This was followed by Sikhism in 2011 with the Dimensions of Asian Spirituality series, published by University of Hawaii. Moving beyond Sikh studies, Dr. Jacobish edited a 2-volume textbook in 2012 and 2013 on world religions, with a significant Canadian focus. Exploring gender in Sikh traditions with the journal Religions as guest editor followed, which was then published in book form with MDPI, Basel, in 2021. Most recently, Dr. Jacobish had the honor of working with Dr. Opinderjeet Kaur Thakkar on the Global Sikh Community volume, published with Routledge in 2023. Dr. Jacobish has presented at conferences across the globe and published over 30 journal and book chapters. Most importantly, Dr. Jacobish has been mentored, influenced, and befriended by so many teachers and scholars, all of whom have contributed to her work in Sikh studies over the past 30 years. Dr. Jacobish has made a seminal contribution in the field of gender studies in the Sikh tradition. So I would now like to request Dr. Vern Dusenberry to join Dr. Peshora Singh in honoring Dr. Jacobish.
I just have to say this is, it's such an honor, and I'm so delighted to truly be surrounded by people that I respect, love even. We're not supposed to talk about love in academia, but there is love, and the kindness is overwhelming. So thank you for this great honor, and especially.
And our third honoree, Dr. Opinderjeet Kaur Thakkar, is Associate Professor of Sikh Studies and the Director of the multi-award-winning Center for Sikh and Punjabi Studies at the University of Wolverhampton. This is the first and only academic center of its kind in the UK and was set up by the university in 2018 and has been funded by the University of Wolverhampton, of which Lord Swaraj Paul is Chancellor and himself a Punjabi. In January 2022, she was elected as President of Theology and Religious Studies UK, and thus becoming the first president of color in its history. Opinderjeet was awarded the MBE in 2018 for her services to higher education to the Sikh community. Opinderjeet has an international profile for her work in Sikh studies and amongst the Sikh community, which is therefore impactful in terms of her outreach activities. She has published widely on Sikhs through books and journal articles, as well as teaching resources on Sikhs and Sikhi for British schools. Her research is widely disseminated in the British Sikh community through projects such as raising awareness of organ donation among Sikhs, on developing Punjabi digital tools, and on addressing Gurdwara governance when exploring the younger generation's engagement with Sikhi and the Gurdwaras. She is a regular consultant to the BBC on Sikh-related matters and was honored with the Sikh Jewel Award in November 2021 at the House of Lords in London. She was named as Inspirational Woman of the Year by Asian Today in 2020 and Influencer of the Year at the British Indian Awards in 2019. I will now request Dr. Arvindpal Singh Mandir to join Dr. Peshora Singh in honoring Dr. Thakkar.
And my thank you also to Professor Peshora Singh and the rest of his team
for this great honour. It's always great to be at these conferences. It's like a family get-together, it's like a family reunion, so it's so nice to receive this
Our fourth honoree is Dr. Robin Reinhardt. And I'll try and breathe this time. This is what happens after COVID. Take a hiatus from public speaking. So Dr. Robin Reinhardt is a professor of religious studies at Lafayette College in Easton, Pennsylvania. Her interest in the Punjab and Sikhism was sparked during her first stay in India in 1984, when she witnessed the aftermath of Indira Gandhi's assassination and the violence that targeted Sikhs in New Delhi. Her dissertation research on Punjabi Hindu Neo-Vedanta saint Swami Ramatirtha led to her first book, One Lifetime, Many Lives, The Experience of Hindu Hagiography, published by Scholars Press in 1999. Swami Ramatirtha's declaration that Bulleh Shah was his favorite poet led her to explore the richness of Punjabi Sufi poetry and the complex discourse on religious boundaries in the Punjab. An offhand remark by a professor in graduate school that the Dasam Granth was, quote, just a bunch of Hindu mythology, end quote, led her to begin exploring this text, which remains the focus of her research to this day. Her book, Debating the Dasam Granth, was published by Oxford in 2011, and she has published numerous articles and book chapters on different aspects of the Dasam Granth. She edited and wrote portions of Contemporary Hinduism, Ritual, Culture, Practice, published by ABC-CLIO in 2004, and joined Mary Pat Fisher to update and revise the 10th edition of the textbook Living Religions, published with Pearson in 2017. She is currently at work on a project exploring the stories of the avatars in the Dasam Granth. Combining both historical and literary perspectives, Dr. Reinhardt has written a captivating account of current debates on the Dasam Granth, the second important text in the canonical literature of the Sikhs. In her analysis, she contextualizes this key text as, quote, strongly associated with Guru Gobind Singh, end quote. Explores, there are a lot of quotes in her words, I apologize for that. Explores the, quote, nature of spiritual and temporal leadership in the context of a broad cosmic framework in which the maintenance of proper order or dharma is critical, end quote. And attempts to understand, quote, how the diverse compositions of the Dasam Granth, from lengthy praises of weapons to tales of wayward women, may fit together as a coherent whole, end quote. It provides an innovative reading of this royal document in the context of courtly literature of India. Dr. Reinhardt's balanced approach in examining the most controversial issues in the field of Sikh studies is highly commendable. I would now like to invite Dr. Louis Fenwick to accept this award on Dr. Reinhardt's behalf.
Well, as someone who's also written on the Dasam Granth, but on its Persian portions, I'm sure Robin is absolutely thrilled to receive this. Thanks you very much, and I thank you too.
Moving on, and our fifth honoree for the night is Dr. Michael Hawley. He's an associate professor in religious studies at Mount Royal University, an adjunct associate professor at in the Department of Classics and Religious Studies at the University of Calgary. He is the editor of Sikh Diaspora, Theory, Agency, and Experience. He co-edited with Dr. Pashora Singh, Reimagining South Asian Religion. In addition to journal articles, he has contributed chapters to the Oxford Handbook of Sikh Studies, edited by Dr. Pashora Singh and Dr. Louis Fenwick, and to Dr. Pashora Singh and Dr. Arvind Mandir's The Sikh World, forthcoming in June. really soon. Dr. Hawley did his PhD at the University of Calgary in the history of religions. His research then focused on the philosophy of Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, post-colonialism, and deconstruction. At the time of graduating, his plan was to focus on Hindu nationalism in the 20th century and the rising tide of Hindutva that was taking hold in the 1990s and early 2000s. Dr. Hawley's interest dramatically shifted when in 2002 he was asked by the department head whether he might be interested in teaching a course on the Sikhs for the University of Calgary. In the fall of 2003, a course on Sikhism was offered at the University of Calgary for the first time since the early 1990s. Dr. Hawley fell in love with this material. With his scholarly interest turned from Hindutva to Sikhs and Sikhism. Since that time, Dr. Hawley has developed other courses on the Sikhs and Sikhism at Mount Royal University. In 2007, Dr. Michael Hawley spearheaded the move to create a Sikh Studies unit at the American Academies of Religion with the support of several of the scholars and now friends who are here today. Before 2008, Sikh Studies had no visibility at the largest professional meeting of scholars in North America. In 2015, Dr. Michael Hawley began a major research project to recover and help record Sikh history in the province of Alberta, Canada. Since then, he has combed through colonial archives and has conducted dozens of interviews with Alberta's Sikh pioneers and their descendants, now spread across Canada. In this time, he has collected thousands of documents and narratives that begin to reveal a rich and untold Sikh history. As part of the Alberta Sikh History Project, Dr. Hawley has been active in local community and mainstream media. He has given dozens of public talks and contributed to public exhibitions about his research findings. Since the inception of this project, Dr. Hawley has worked closely with local Sikh institutions and Sikh research assistants to direct and to write this history. As a digital platform, the Alberta Sikh History Project is a globally accessible project, but as an archive of local voice and gaze, its primary audience are Sikhs and Sanghas across the province, as well as for scholars, the general public, and Sikhophiles of all degrees. The archive contains a wide range of documents, recorded Sikh narratives, and interpretations of Sikh experiences in the province, more of which you will hear about tomorrow in the first panel. I would now like to request Dr. Amritjit Singh to join Dr. Pashora Singh in honoring Dr. Michael Hawley.
Dr. Singh, you gotta come forward.
I also would just like to say very, very quickly that very often we don't get a chance to publicly. I just do want to recognize some of the scholars that I called back in 2007 and got me started on this journey. Doris Jacobs, of course, and two people who are not here today, who are Robin Reinhardt and, of course,
And our final honoree today is Dr. Parvinder Singh Kanuja. Dr. Parvinder Singh Kanuja is a practicing medical oncologist. He was born in Muzaffarnagar in India and received his education and medical training in India and the United States. He is a fellow of the American College of Physicians and has lived for the last 30 years in Phoenix, Arizona, where he founded the Ironwood Cancer Center in 1993. Currently, he is the founder and managing partner of one of the largest cancer care providers in the United States. He also serves on the board of Select Medical, which is a Fortune 500 healthcare company. Being an avid art collector, Dr. Khanuja has endowed a permanent Sikh art gallery in Phoenix, at Phoenix Art Museum, where he is also on the board of trustees. He believes that although life is a transitory and ever-changing process, history needs to be preserved. He has been collecting Punjab-related artwork for the last 15 years with the goal of preserving it for the future generations. Dr. Khanuja has recently published a book on splendors of Punjab heritage in association with the Smithsonian Institute. This illustrated coffee table book is edited by Dr. Paul Michael Taylor and is on display in the conference. Dr. Khanuja is on the board of Dasvan Network and Five Rivers Foundation, committed to helping the growing Sikh-related causes. He has played a major role in promoting the field of Sikh studies in North America. Through Five Rivers Foundation, run by his own family, Dr. Khanuja has been instrumental in supporting our graduate students at the University of California working in the field of Sikh studies by providing them with annual research awards. I would now like to request Dr. Harkirat Singh Dhillon to join Pashara Singh in honoring Dr. Khanuja.
Dr. Dillon, okay, you all have to be in focus.
Switch places, that's great.
Thank you for this kind award, Dr. Shora Singh, and all of you in the university. Honored to be in such distinguished company. You know, I'm not a true academician, but
with this celebration of scholarship, we are now at the end of our reception function, and you can continue to have conversation. Is dessert being served? Okay. Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much.
We have a vote of thanks for Dr. Louis Fennick.
Yeah. I will request now Dr. Louis Fennick to say a few words.
Can y'all hear me? All right, all right, all right. Well, so I start every class with my students that way. How are you guys doing today? Well, this was thrown on me at the last minute, so I'm speaking off the cuff and impromptu. I'm so happy to be here. I haven't seen any of you in person for over 3 years, and you are all very dear to me. Thank you. I mean, you are my beautiful friends, old and new. I'd like to thank you on behalf of Robin, who couldn't be here. I'd like to thank everyone who's helped us get here once again safely. I'd like to thank, the indigenous people on whose land we are so fortunate enough to be situated at the moment. Indigenous people who have, who gave over this territory in an unconceded way. And as I've said before, for those of us in Sikh studies, it's very important to keep that in mind, particularly in the light of the fact that Guru Gobind Singh also had to give up his territory in an unconceded manner. And so I think it's good for us to keep that in mind. It's just been a wonderful experience. And again, thank you to everybody who's made this possible. And again, thank you again for Robin, who couldn't be here and who is so happy to accept this award. So thank you. Be safe, everyone. Sat Sri Akal, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you.